Cities don't happen by accident. Every street, every neighborhood, every mile of infrastructure is the result of decisions made long before we ever lived there. In this channel, we don't chase headlines or quick opinions. We slow down. We look at history, design, and the systems beneath the surface. Because to understand cities, you first have to understand the choices that shaped them. Imagine landing in a major American city. You step outside the airport. The buildings are tall, the roads are wide, but something feels empty. You want to walk, there's nowhere to go. You want to explore, everything is miles apart. In most of the United States, the city is not designed for people. It is designed for movement, specifically car movement. This didn't happen by accident. It wasn't inevitable, and it wasn't always this way. Tonight, we're going to trace the hidden decisions, political, economic, and cultural, that turned American cities into some of the most car-dependent places on Earth. Not to blame, but to understand. Before the car took over, how American cities were originally built. 1. American cities were not born car-dependent. One of the most common myths in urban history is that American cities became car-dependent because the country is too big. This explanation is comforting, it feels logical, and it is mostly wrong. The earliest American cities were dense, compact, and highly walkable. Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Charleston, Savannah. All were founded long before automobiles existed, and their physical form reflected the technologies of their time: feet, horses, and streetcars. Distances were short, blocks were narrow, streets followed human scale. A city had to be walkable because there was no alternative. 2. The human scale city. In the 18th and 19th centuries, urban design followed a simple rule. A city must be navigated within 20 to 30 minutes on foot. This rule wasn't written down, it was enforced by reality. People walked to work, children walked to school, markets, churches, and homes existed within close proximity. Density was not a lifestyle choice, it was survival. Even wealthier citizens lived close to city centers. There were no distant suburbs because distance itself was expensive. 3. The street as public space. Early American streets were not traffic corridors, they were social infrastructure. Streets hosted commerce, conversation, children playing, political gatherings. Movement happened slowly. Human interaction mattered more than speed. This is a crucial point. The street was not designed to be optimized, it was designed to be shared. 4. The arrival of streetcars changed everything, temporarily. In the mid-19th century, a new technology reshaped American cities, the streetcar. Streetcars allowed cities to stretch outward while maintaining density. They created what historians call streetcar suburbs. These neighborhoods were still walkable, still compact, still transit-oriented. People could live farther from work but not disconnected from it. Importantly, this expansion did not destroy the city structure, it extended it. 5. Early suburbs were not car suburbs. The word suburb today implies sprawl, highways, and parking lots. Historically, that was not the case. Early American suburbs had grid layouts, had sidewalks, had mixed uses, had local retail. They were built around transit stops, not parking requirements. In many cases, these neighborhoods remain some of the most desirable places to live today. 6. The critical turning point was not technology. It is tempting to say that cars ruined cities the moment they appeared. But cars alone did not cause car dependency. For a brief period in the early 20th century, cities experimented with coexistence: pedestrians, streetcars, horses, and automobiles. The conflict was real, but the outcome was not predetermined. The question was not, can cities handle cars? The real question was, who should cities be designed for? 7. Political enter the street. As automobiles became more common, deaths increased, especially pedestrian deaths. Public outrage followed, but instead of limiting cars, cities began redesigning streets to protect cars from people. This is where language changed. Streets stopped being public spaces, they became traffic systems. Pedestrians were reframed as obstacles, crossing the street became a regulated activity. This shift did not come from engineers alone, it came from lobbying, media influence, and economic power.
reframing of freedom. The automobile was marketed not as a tool, but as an identity. Cars represented freedom, independence, modernity. Walking, by contrast, was framed as outdated, slow, lower status. Urban form followed cultural values. When freedom became associated with speed and distance, cities adapted accordingly.
9. Why this matters today. Understanding this early history is essential because it reveals a critical truth. American cities did not evolve naturally into car dependency. They were redirected. The streets did not fail people. Policy failed streets. And once cities were redesigned around cars, reversing that logic became increasingly difficult. 10. The path forward and the trap ahead. By the 1920s, American cities stood at a crossroads. They could refine transit-oriented growth, protect pedestrian life, maintain density. Or they could widen roads, separate uses, prioritize speed. The choice they made would shape the next century. And that choice was about to be locked in, permanently. Zoning, separation, and the legal invention of sprawl. The most important urban decision Americans never notice. When people talk about car dependency, they usually point to highways. But highways came later. The real foundation of car dependency was laid quietly, not with concrete, but with law. That law was zoning. Zoning did not simply regulate buildings, it redefined how Americans were allowed to live. Cities before zoning were mixed by default. Before the 20th century, American cities were not neatly separated. Homes existed near shops, workshops, offices, schools. This wasn't ideology, it was practicality. If you walked to work, land uses naturally mixed. Noise, smell, and risk existed, but so did proximity, efficiency, and community. The anxiety of the industrial city. By the early 1900s, American cities were growing fast. Factories expanded, immigration surged, density increased. With growth came fear, overcrowding, pollution, disease, social mixing. Urban problems were real, but the solutions chosen were deeply shaped by class and power. Zoning is social control. The first comprehensive zoning codes appeared in the 1910s and 1920s. Officially, zoning promised public health, safety, order. Unofficially, it enforced economic separation, racial exclusion, property value protection. Single-family zoning was not neutral. It made one housing type legally dominant and outlawed alternatives. The single-family ideal becomes law. Detached single-family homes were elevated as the ideal American dwelling. Everything else became suspect. Apartments, duplexes, corner shops, mixed-use buildings. Zoning codes restricted density, height, and land use. This forced distance, and distance demands transportation. Why zoning made cars necessary? Once daily needs were legally separated, walking stopped working. Home here, work there, shopping somewhere else. Transit struggled to serve spread-out, low-density patterns. Cars didn't just become convenient, they became mandatory. Zoning didn't respond to cars, cars responded to zoning. Parking requirements, the hidden multiplier. Zoning didn't stop at land use, it mandated parking. Every building now required space not for people, but for vehicles. Parking increased distances, raised construction costs, destroyed street life, consumed urban land. Cities began designing for stationary cars as much as moving ones. The illusion of choice. Zoning is often framed as protecting neighborhood character. But most Americans never voted on the system itself. They inherited it. The choice wasn't between walking and driving. The choice was already made in code. Economic consequences locked the pattern in. Once zoning reshaped land values, reversal became difficult. Low-density areas required more infrastructure, generated less tax revenue, demanded constant expansion. But politically, they were protected. Car dependency became financially fragile, yet legally untouchable. A system that feels natural but isn't. Today, many Americans assume this is just how cities work. Separate zones, wide roads, mandatory parking, long commutes. But this system is younger than most historic downtowns. It was invented, it was enforced, and it could have been different. Federal policy, mortgages, and the mass production of car dependency. 1.
car dependency becomes national policy. Zoning created the framework, but it was the federal government that scaled it. In the 1930s, the United States faced a crisis: economic collapse, housing shortages, failing banks. The response would permanently reshape American cities, not through urban design theory, but through finance. 2. The New Deal and the invention of the modern mortgage. Before the 1930s, home ownership worked very differently. Mortgages were short-term, high-interest, risky. Buying a home required wealth and stability. The New Deal changed this. Federal programs standardized long-term mortgages, low down payments, predictable monthly costs. Home ownership was transformed into a mass product. 3. Standardization demands simplicity. To reduce financial risk, federal agencies needed predictability. Predictability favored uniform housing, uniform neighborhoods, uniform values. Mixed-use, dense urban areas were considered unstable. Suburban, single-family neighborhoods were considered safe. This judgment had nothing to do with walkability and everything to do with risk models. 4. The suburb becomes a financial instrument. Suburbs weren't just places to live. They became investment vehicles, collateral systems, long-term financial bets. To protect those bets, federal guidelines discouraged apartments, transit adjacency, non-residential uses. Density was framed as danger. Distance became safety. 5. Infrastructure follows finance. Once mortgages pushed development outward, infrastructure had to follow: roads, utilities, schools. But transit was an afterthought. Low-density patterns are expensive to serve efficiently with transit. Cars filled the gap. Not because they were ideal, but because the pattern demanded them. 6. The feedback loop locks in. Suburban growth created a cycle. More suburbs, more roads. More roads, longer distances. Longer distances, more driving. More driving, justification for wider roads. Each step reinforced the next. This wasn't conspiracy, it was momentum. 7. The cultural rebranding of suburban living. Federal policy didn't just fund suburbs, it normalized them. Marketing framed suburban living as stable, respectable, family-oriented. Urban living was framed as risky, temporary, transitional. The car became a symbol of success, not necessity. 8. The invisible cost of cheap housing. Suburban homes appeared affordable, but the true costs were externalized: road maintenance, traffic injuries, environmental damage, household transportation expenses. Housing was cheap because transportation was expensive and mandatory. 9. Transit loses the economic war. As development spread, transit systems lost riders. Lower density meant fewer passengers per mile, higher operating costs. Transit was framed as inefficient, but it was being forced to serve an inefficient pattern. The pattern won. 10. A national template is born. By mid-century, a clear model had emerged: single-use zoning, mortgage-backed suburbs, road-based mobility. This wasn't just how cities grew. It became the default expectation. American cities didn't merely allow car dependency. They financed it.
Highways through the city. Speed, power, and urban destruction. 1. Highways were not just transportation projects. When Americans think about highways, they imagine mobility. But in cities, highways were something else entirely. They were political instruments, economic weapons, spatial rewriters. Highways did not simply move cars faster, they rearranged who belonged where. 2. The interstate system changes the scale of movement. In the 1950s, the federal government launched the interstate highway system. Official goals: national defense, regional connectivity, economic efficiency. But when highways entered cities, their function shifted. Urban highways prioritized long-distance speed, through traffic, commuter flow. Local life became collateral damage. 3. Cutting the city open. Highways required space. Cities rarely had it, so it was taken. Neighborhoods were demolished, fragmented, isolated. Entire communities disappeared under concrete. This was not accidental.
Highway routes were often chosen through low-income areas, minority neighborhoods, politically weak communities. Displacement was treated as acceptable. 4. The illusion of congestion relief. Highways were sold as congestion solutions. But congestion is not a technical problem, it is a behavioral one. Adding road capacity encourages more driving. Traffic quickly returns. What changes is the urban form: longer trips, farther destinations, more car dependence. Congestion remains, cities lose density. 5. Downtowns become transit zones for suburbs. Urban highways transformed city centers. Downtowns became commuter destinations, parking destinations, drive-through spaces. Local residents were deprioritized. The city stopped being a place to live, it became a place to pass through. 6. The destruction of street networks. Highways broke fine-grained street grids. They introduced dead ends, barriers, massive interchanges. Walking distances increased, neighborhood connections vanished. Even areas not directly destroyed were weakened. 7. Noise, pollution, and psychological distance. Highways didn't just divide land, they divided people. Noise and pollution created invisible walls. Crossing a highway felt unsafe or impossible. Communities on either side stopped interacting. Urban cohesion fractured. 9. Transit loses its competitive advantage. Highways accelerated suburban commuting. Transit couldn't compete with subsidized speed. Public investment favored asphalt, interchanges, parking. Transit funding stagnated. Car dependence hardened. 10. What was lost and what replaced it. Highways replaced neighborhoods, local economies, public life. They delivered speed, access, regional integration, but at a cost rarely calculated honestly. American cities became easier to drive through and harder to live in.
Suburban economics, local government, and the trap of car dependency. 1. Car dependency is not just design, it's a budget strategy. By the late 20th century, American cities were no longer choosing car dependency. They were dependent on it. Not culturally, not emotionally, financially. Local governments had built systems that only worked if growth continued outward and if residents kept driving. 2. How local governments pay their bills. Unlike many countries, U.S. cities rely heavily on property taxes, sales taxes, development fees. This structure rewards expansion. More land developed means more taxable property, more retail space, more short-term revenue. Density, by contrast, requires maintenance. 3. The suburban growth illusion. New suburban development appears profitable. Infrastructure is new. Maintenance costs are low. But this is temporary. Roads, pipes, and utilities age and must be replaced. Low-density areas generate less tax revenue per acre while costing more to maintain. The gap is covered by more growth. 4. The growth Ponzi pattern. Many U.S. municipalities unknowingly operate on a fragile model. New growth pays for old obligations. As long as expansion continues, the system survives. When it slows, deficits appear. This incentivizes more subdivisions, more roads, more driving. Stopping sprawl feels fiscally dangerous. 5. Why walkability looks too expensive. Walkable urban development requires upfront investment, demands political coordination, challenges existing zoning. The benefits arrive slowly, but suburban expansion delivers quick, visible growth. Elected officials respond to election cycles, not 30-year infrastructure timelines. 6. Retail, parking, and sales tax dependency. Cities chase retail. Retail demands easy car access, large parking lots, highway proximity. Sales tax revenue shapes land use. Parking becomes economic policy, not convenience. 7. The cost shift to households. Public costs are quietly transferred to private budgets. Families pay for multiple vehicles, fuel, insurance, maintenance.
Housing appears affordable. Total cost of living rises. Car dependency hides its price in monthly expenses. 8. Why local opposition is so strong. Residents oppose change not because they hate walkability. They fear parking loss, congestion, property value shifts. In a car-dependent system, these fears are rational. The system punishes deviation. 9. The institutional inertia problem. Planning departments, engineering manuals, and traffic standards were written for cars. Professionals are trained to optimize vehicle flow, road capacity, parking supply. Changing the system requires unlearning decades of practice. Institutions resist disruption. 10. A city designed to defend itself. At this stage, car dependency no longer needs ideology. It survives on financial momentum, legal structure, institutional habit. The city has become a machine that demands driving to function.
The human cost: time, health, inequality, and everyday life. 1. Car dependency reshaped daily life. Car dependency is often discussed in terms of infrastructure, but its deepest impact is personal. It shapes how long people commute, where children can go, who remains independent, how much time families actually share. The city is no longer experienced at human speed. It is experienced through windshields. 2. Time becomes a hidden tax. In car-dependent cities, time is fragmented. Commuting stretches daily schedules. Short distances take long minutes. Traffic steals hours quietly, every week, every year. Unlike rent or taxes, this cost is rarely calculated, but it is one of the most expensive consequences of car dependency. 3. The loss of everyday freedom. Paradoxically, a system built around freedom reduces autonomy. Without a car, jobs become inaccessible, errands become complex, social life shrinks. Driving is framed as optional. In practice, it is compulsory. 4. Children and the end of independent mobility. In walkable cities, children navigate their environment. In car-dependent cities, children are passengers. School drop-offs replace walking. Play is scheduled, supervised, and distant. This changes childhood itself. 5. Health outcomes are not accidental. Car-dependent environments correlate with lower physical activity, higher rates of chronic illness, increased stress. The issue is not personal choice. It is environmental design. When movement requires driving, inactivity becomes normal. 6. Safety redefined, and redefined poorly. Car-oriented design prioritizes vehicle speed. This increases traffic injuries, pedestrian fatalities. Streets feel hostile. People adapt by avoiding them. Public life withdraws. 7. Inequality becomes spatial. Car dependency amplifies inequality. Those who can afford cars access opportunity. Those who cannot face isolation. Transit-dependent residents endure longer commutes, fewer job options, higher vulnerability. Mobility becomes a marker of class. 8. Aging in a car-dependent world. As people age, driving becomes harder. In car-dependent cities, independence declines, isolation increases, daily life becomes fragile. The built environment offers no alternative. Aging becomes a mobility crisis. 9. Social capital erodes quietly. When streets are dangerous and distances long, interaction declines. Neighbors become strangers, community weakens. Cities lose the casual encounters that build trust. This loss is subtle but profound. 10. The cost no one budgets for. Car dependency does not appear as a line item, but it costs time, health, connection, opportunity. These losses accumulate slowly. They are normalized, and they are deeply human.
Why fixing car dependency is so hard, and why so many reforms fail. 1. Awareness is not the problem. Today, the issues are well documented. Planners know sprawl is costly. Congestion doesn't disappear. Walkability improves quality of life. The challenge is not knowledge. It is implementation. 2. The myth of the quick fix. Many cities attempt surface-level solutions: bike lanes without networks, transit without density, pedestrian upgrades without zoning reform. These projects are visible, but they do not change the underlying system. Car dependency adapts and survives.
3. Political risk and local opposition. Urban change is personal. Parking loss feels immediate. Density feels threatening. Even small reforms trigger intense resistance. Elected officials learn quickly. Transportation reform is politically dangerous. 4. The engineering trap. Transportation standards prioritize vehicle throughput, level of service, traffic delay. These metrics reward speed. They punish safety and human scale. Engineers operate within rulebooks designed for cars. Breaking those rules carries professional risk. 5. Fragmented authority. In U.S. cities, control is divided. Federal funding, state road standards, local zoning. No single actor can change the system alone. Each level waits for another to move first. Inaction becomes stable. 6. The transition problem. Car dependency cannot be turned off overnight. During transition, congestion may increase, construction disrupts routines, benefits take time. Opponents point to short-term pain. Long-term gains struggle to compete politically. 7. Equity concerns complicate reform. Change can raise land values. Without safeguards, displacement occurs, affordability declines. Communities harmed by past planning distrust new promises. Reform requires credibility and patience. 8. Funding still favors roads. Despite rhetoric, money tells the truth. Road expansion remains easier to fund than maintenance. Transit funding is uncertain and competitive. The bias persists. 9. Success is incremental and often invisible. The most effective changes are subtle. Zoning reform, parking reform, street redesigns. They lack dramatic visuals, but they reshape behavior over time. This makes success hard to sell. 10. The system was built to resist change. Car dependency is not fragile. It is resilient. It is reinforced by law, finance, habit, fear. Fixing it requires more than projects. It requires structural courage.
Cities that are trying something different, and what actually works. 1. Change is already happening, quietly. Despite the obstacles, some American cities are shifting direction. Not dramatically, not overnight, but deliberately. These cities share one trait. They stopped chasing perfect solutions and started fixing systems. 2. The return of the street as a place. Successful reforms begin with a simple idea. Streets are public spaces, not just traffic corridors. Cities that rebalanced streets saw safer movement, slower speeds, increased activity. Design, not enforcement, changed behavior. 3. The power of zoning reform. The most effective changes often happen off the street. Cities allowing duplexes, accessory dwelling units, small apartments did not eliminate cars. They reduced dependence. More people living closer together made alternatives viable. 4. Parking reform as urban catalyst. Removing mandatory parking requirements had outsized effects. Projects became cheaper to build, more flexible, more human-scaled. Less parking did not eliminate access. It reduced forced driving. 5. Transit that serves density, not distance. Successful transit investment focused on frequency, reliability, land use alignment. Coverage mattered less than usefulness. Transit became competitive again. 6. Incremental, not revolutionary change. Cities that succeed avoid grand master plans. They implement pilot projects, temporary materials, fast feedback loops. Failure is allowed and corrected. 7. Equity as structure, not slogan. Cities learning from past harm embedded equity early. They paired investment with affordability protections, community ownership tools, anti-displacement measures. Trust became infrastructure. 8. The cultural shift is subtle. As alternatives improve, behavior shifts naturally. People walk when it feels safe. They use transit when it is reliable. Choice returns. 9. What these cities have in common. They did not wait for perfection. They changed codes, reallocated space, measured people, not cars, and they stayed consistent. 10. Progress without illusion. None of these cities eliminated cars. They reduced dependency. This distinction matters. The goal is not rejection. It is balance.
The future of American cities, climate, technology, and the limits of car dependency. 1. Car dependency is reaching its physical limits. For decades, American cities expanded outward. That strategy is running out of room, not metaphorically, literally.
Land is finite. Infrastructure costs are compounding. Maintenance backlogs are growing. The system that once felt limitless is now constrained. 2. Climate pressure is not abstract anymore. Transportation is one of the largest sources of emissions in the United States. This is not a moral argument. It is a structural one. Car-dependent urban form locks in high energy use, resists efficiency gains, multiplies per capita impact. Efficiency improvements help, but they do not change geometry. Distance still matters. 3. Electric vehicles change the engine, not the city. Electric vehicles are often presented as a solution. They solve one problem well, tailpipe emissions. They do not solve congestion, sprawl, road maintenance, traffic danger, land consumption. An electric traffic jam is still a traffic jam. The city remains car-shaped. 5. Autonomous vehicles won't save urban space. Autonomous vehicles promise efficiency, but efficiency often increases demand. If driving becomes easier, more people will do it. Without policy change, vehicle miles increase, streets stay congested, space is still consumed. Technology accelerates existing patterns. It rarely reverses them. 5. Demographic shifts are changing demand. Younger generations are delaying car ownership, suburban relocation. Older generations are aging in place. Both groups benefit from proximity. This creates pressure for walkable centers, mixed-use neighborhoods, flexible housing. Demand is shifting faster than regulation. 6. Economic competitiveness is becoming urban again. Cities compete for talent. Talent values access, time, experience. Car-dependent environments struggle to deliver these efficiently. Urban form is now an economic variable. 7. Infrastructure debt is forcing hard choices. Roads built decades ago need replacement. The bill is coming due. Maintaining sprawl requires higher taxes, service cuts, deferred repairs. Cities will have to choose, maintain everything or change the pattern. 8. Resilience requires redundancy. Car dependency is fragile. One mode dominates. When fuel prices rise, systems strain. When roads fail, options disappear. Resilient cities offer multiple ways to move. Redundancy is not inefficiency, it is stability. 9. The end of the default setting. The future does not demand eliminating cars. It demands ending automatic dependence. Cities will still have vehicles, but they will no longer design only for them. This is a shift in priority, not prohibition. 10. The question cities can no longer avoid. The real question ahead is simple. Will American cities continue expanding a system that no longer fits their constraints? Or will they redesign themselves to match reality? The answer will define the next century.
What car dependency really means, and what comes next. 1. Car dependency was a choice, repeated over time. Car dependency in American cities did not emerge from geography. It came from laws, financing, engineering standards, cultural narratives. Each decision felt reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a system. 2. The city became a machine. Over time, American cities stopped behaving like places. They began functioning like systems optimized for movement. Efficiency replaced experience. Speed replaced presence. Distance replaced connection. The city still worked, but not for everyone. 3. Why the system feels normal. Car dependency is invisible to those who fit inside it. If you can drive, can afford vehicles, live near highways, the system appears functional. Its failures are distributed unevenly. This makes reform difficult. 4. The cost of doing nothing. Maintaining the status quo is not neutral. It means rising infrastructure debt, worsening inequality, increased vulnerability to shocks. The system is not stable. It is aging. 5. What real change actually looks like. Real change is not dramatic. It is procedural. It involves legal reform, financial realignment, design standards that prioritize people. Progress happens quietly and cumulatively. 6. Cities are already choosing. Every year, cities make decisions. They choose where to invest, what to allow, who to prioritize. These choices shape behavior more than any campaign. 7. The future is not anti-car. This is not about banning vehicles. It is about restoring balance. Cars should be useful, not mandatory. 8. The measure of a successful city. A successful city is not one where traffic flows fastest.
It is one where daily life is accessible, time is respected, movement is optional. Freedom is not distance, it is proximity. 9. The quiet reversal already underway. Small changes are accumulating. Zoning updates, parking reform, street redesign. Individually modest, collectively transformative. 10. The choice ahead. American cities are approaching a moment of clarity. They can continue reinforcing a system built for another era, or they can adapt deliberately, carefully, and honestly. The outcome will not be immediate, but it will be permanent. For most Americans, car dependency feels inevitable. But history shows something else. It was designed, it was financed, it was enforced. Which means it can be redesigned. Not by erasing cars, but by ending the assumption that every trip must require one. The question isn't whether cars belong in American cities. The question is whether they should define them. So here's the conversation I want to open. If your city had to choose today, would it continue doubling down on car dependency, or would it start designing for people again? I'm curious how you see it, especially where you live.